Coming up, a tuition rate freeze bill introduced in the House. And it's crunch time in the Iowa legislature.
And later, President Biden faces more criticisms for his age.
All of that and a profile on a presidential candidate, important dates this week in history, and making sure your facts are straight.
Also, where presidential candidates are during their campaign trails, the latest from polls, and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Johnny Valtman. And as we do every week, we're going to keep it here in Iowa City and Johnson County. Jordan, what's been going on?
Well, Johnny, a local state representative has proposed a bill in the Iowa House that would freeze in-state tuition. Adam Zabner, a Democrat from Iowa City representing Iowa's 90th district, introduced the bill last Wednesday as House File 2352. The bill, if passed, would freeze tuition from rising for students attending Iowa's Regent schools, which are the University of Iowa, the University of Northern Iowa, and Iowa State University. This freeze would only cover the students' first 4 years of college. Now, the bill doesn't freeze tuition rate increases entirely, as it would just lock students in a student's price from their first year onwards. House Democrats estimate that it would save students over $2,500 in tuition and fees over 4 years. And according to the Education Data Initiative, over 430,000 people in Iowa are student loan borrowers, and $13.2 billion in repayments are owed among residents of Iowa. In other local news, Representative Heather Hora has announced her re-election bid for Iowa House District 92, which covers most of the southern part of Johnson County. If re-elected, Hora, a Republican from Washington, Iowa, would be serving her second term in office. Hora currently serves as the vice chair of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Appropriation Subcommittee, along with being a member of 4 other House committees. Now, with all this talk about House bills, and they still got the House legislature session going on, Johnny.
Yes, Jordan, and this is a very important week out in Des Moines. So we're going to be bringing in Cara Dulin, who has more on what they're doing out in Des Moines.
Thanks, Johnny. This week is a big one in the Iowa legislature because it's the first funnel week of the legislative session. What this means is that this week, legislators are scrambling to get as many bills as they can through committees. The deadline is Friday, and any bill that doesn't get approved by a committee in the chamber by then is generally considered to be dead, with a few exceptions. Bills related to spending or taxes don't have to meet the deadline, and sometimes legislative leaders get creative about reviving certain proposals post-deadline, but for the most part, anything that doesn't make it through is just dropped. The purpose of this is to cut down the number of proposals lawmakers have to look at and decide on. Otherwise, there would be way too much going on. One of the proposals we're expecting to hear about this week is one we discussed a couple of weeks ago on the show, and that's Governor Reynolds' Area Education Agencies overhaul. Another is a bill that would let city councils override public library boards. Currently, the law requires any proposed changes to library boards to be put to the vote of citizens, so this change would essentially strip the library boards of any authority they have. It's a controversial proposal, and it's not the only one in play, as Republicans have also introduced several that have been met with resistance for seemingly targeting undocumented immigrants. Meanwhile, some bills have already survived funnel week. These include one by Governor Reynolds that would define the labels man and woman as the sex an individual was assigned at birth rather than how they identify, and one that extends Medicaid coverage for women for a full year after giving birth. This is a huge leap from the current postpartum coverage, which is just 60 days. We'll be sure to keep you updated on these proposals as they either make their way through the legislature or die out, but for now, I'll send it back to Jordan and Johnny.
Thanks, Cara. And Jordan, there are some things going on around the country, whether it's in the White House or throughout the other states. It's interesting to see what's been going down.
Yeah, and now we're going to send it to Jayce in the newsroom, where he's going to tell us what's going on around the country.
Thanks, Jordan. I'd like to start with the long-awaited special counsel report on President Biden's handling of classified documents, specifically on the counsel's report on Biden's mental health. In the report, Special Counsel Robert Hur alleges that Biden's memory was, quote, significantly limited as the president seemed to forget key details of his life, such as when his vice presidency ended, discussions with his cabinet about the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, and even the date of his son's death. This comes with increasing concerns over whether or not Biden's age will affect his performance in a second term. In a poll taken by the Associated Press in August of 2023, 77% of American adults expressed concerns over Biden's age. 74% of independent voters agreed. 89% of Republicans doubted his ability to perform effectively at his age, while 69% of Democrats had similar sentiments. Biden's camp has taken to adamantly pushing against the report's concerns, claiming Counsel Her is a Trump loyalist while affirming the president's ability to lead. Meanwhile, Republicans have taken the report as an opportunity to further attack Biden's re-election campaign.
And I've been around, I know I don't look like it, but I've been around a while. I do remember that.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on in the Middle East and around the world.
The special counsel's decision to cherry pick in a very misleading way, it just goes off the rails. It's a shabby piece of work.
When you're questioning what 70-some% of the American people are already questioning, whether Joe Biden is too old for the job, that's much more damaging politically than whether people would have agreed or disagreed with him being charged.
To stem the wound caused by the report, the Senate pushed a new spending bill ahead on Sunday. The bill would allot $95 billion for Ukraine and Israel. This would replace a failed bill that included funding for border agents. And the bill is now going to the House, where it will be pushed to the president's desk, amended, or rejected outright. I'll keep following the votes, but for now, I'll send it to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. And Jordan, watching the Super Bowl, it was a good game, but I was a bit more surprised with the presidential campaign ad we got. Out of everyone who's running, I was surprised with who put one on.
Yes, Johnny. And with more info on that candidate, we have a new member of the Update staff, Grace Lathrop, who has this week's candidate profile.
Thanks, Jordan and Johnny. After watching the Super Bowl this weekend, Robert Kennedy Jr. is making a statement not only through his commercial, but also through his campaign. Born in Washington, D.C., RFK Jr. is the son of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and nephew of former President John F. Kennedy. He attended Harvard University in 1976, earning his bachelor's in political science, and then headed back towards home to attend the University of Virginia for law school. His business career launched when he began working as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan. He then volunteered for an environmental nonprofit called Riverkeeper, quickly becoming the organization's district chief attorney. Kennedy also co-founded the Waterkeeper Alliance, which became the world's largest nonprofit for clean water, and he served as its president for 21 years. He announced his campaign in October of 2023 as an independent candidate after removing himself from the Democratic Party. His goals include fighting corporate company corruption, building water systems, cleaning the environment, and earning the American people's trust by ending secrecy and censorship. He is also an anti-vaccine activist. Kennedy is married to actress Cheryl Hines and is a father to 7 children and a grandfather to 2. Polls have shown that Kennedy is the leading choice for young voters ages 18 to 34, where 34% said they would vote for the environmental lawyer over Trump and Biden. Back to you, Jordan and Johnny.
Thanks, Grace. And with all this talk about candidates, I'm kind of wondering how they're doing on the campaign trail, Johnny.
Yes, Jordan. And this week, candidates are touring South Carolina, dealing with proceedings, and one is joining TikTok. Nikki Haley is on a bus tour the next couple of days in South Carolina as she prepares for the highly anticipated Republican South Carolina primary. She will then head to Dallas on Thursday with just under a month left until the Texas primary. A talking point for the 2 Republican candidates came up with the former president's remarks about America's NATO allies.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
He's not qualified to be the president of the United States. He would not only not defend our friends and allies in NATO, but that he would encourage Putin to go and invade those countries.
Speaking of the former president, he sat in a closed courtroom Monday involving his charges with taking classified documents with him when he left the White House. After the closed hearing, he then asked for the United States Supreme Court to block the ruling which would deny presidential immunity in his January 6, 2021 case. President Joe Biden's campaign joined TikTok over the weekend, even though his campaign last year stated that they would not be using the social media app. And behind closed doors, the president is frustrated with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. According to donors who heard Biden's venting session, Israel's Prime Minister has not listened to Biden's pleas for a ceasefire or a change of strategy in the war. And as we are almost halfway through February, there are 2 primaries remaining in the month. The Republican primary for South Carolina will take place on the 24th, followed by both sides holding a primary in Michigan on the 27th. And Jordan, with those primaries quickly approaching and Super Tuesday coming up, polls, they're going to be telling a big story in the coming weeks.
Yes, with Super Tuesday just a little under a month away, poll numbers are being looked at a little more closely as the days go on. However, before that fateful day on March 5th, there's still a couple more state contests to be decided. In the next primary taking place in South Carolina on February 24th, former President Donald Trump is projected to still have a large advantage over the former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, in her home state by a margin of 65% to 31%, according to number site 538. And in the projected presidential race in Iowa, Donald Trump still holds a lead over incumbent Joe Biden with a 48 to 40% total. The rest of the country tells a different story, however. In many national polls, Trump has been edging Biden for a while now, and according to Florida Atlantic University, that's set to continue. Trump still has the country with 41%, but Biden is keeping within shouting distance, only being 4 percentage points behind. Now, with all this factual information with the poll numbers, Johnny, you've got some history for us.
Yes, Jordan, and we're going to be retelling some stories, as this week we're introducing a new segment called This Week in History, where we'll look back in time to historical events in which we are still seeing the impacts to this day. Jordan. On February 12, 1999, the impeachment of President Bill Clinton ended after the Senate voted that they would keep Clinton in office. Clinton was on trial for 2 charges, perjury and obstruction of justice, specifically lying under oath during his lawsuit against Paula Jones. The former president denied having sexual relations with White House Secretary Monica Lewinsky. Evidence then later surfaced that suggested he had, leading to the House of Representatives to bring the impeachment to the Senate. The 2/3 needed to oust Clinton as the president on both counts failed. Since then, former President Donald Trump faced 2 separate impeachments in 2019 and 2021, which he was acquitted for both. Current President Joe Biden is also facing an ongoing impeachment inquiry and are still waiting on the ruling on if the Senate will vote to strip him of his power. On February 15, 1889, the USS Maine sank in the Havana harbor. The ship was sent from Florida to Cuba to protect American interests during the Cuban War of Independence, where Americans backed Cuban forces to free themselves from Spain's ruling of the country. 5 long tons of powder charges were ignited in the front guns of the ship, resulting in 268 of the crew members dying in the explosion. What caused the explosion went immediately up for debate on whether it was an accident or an attack. Major United States newspapers, including the New York Journal, the New World, and the World, immediately ran with what many believe the first form of yellow journalism, pushing their agendas and obscuring the facts, claiming that Spain sunk the USS Maine. America would go on to declare war on Spain in April. After 7 months of fighting, Cuba won their independence and Spain gave the U.S. Guam and Puerto Rico. Recently, historians have debated how the press influenced the American people into a pro-war stance. Many of the reports were factual, but did push an agenda blaming Spain. To this day, there is still debate whether the USS Maine was sunk by a Spanish mine or its own malfunction. And speaking of facts being obscured, Jordan, still looking through social media, still seeing a lot of crazy stuff out there.
Yeah, and now we're going to send it to Jayce in the newsroom, where he's going to share a few claims that he found that aren't entirely true.
Thanks, Johnny. And I'd like to start with claims that former President Donald Trump is being kept off the 2024 ballot in Hawaii. Posts online spreading the claim assert that a bill passed through the Hawaii Senate barring Trump from appearing on the ballot in November. However, the status of this bill is being misrepresented. While there is a bill moving through Hawaii that would bar Trump from the ballot, the bill still has to pass through 2 more votes in the state Senate, then to the state House for it to actually become law. Furthermore, even if the bill is to pass, the Supreme Court may rule against a similar law in Colorado, rendering the votes null and void. And next, I'd like to take a look at claims surrounding Microsoft's user policies. These claims state that Microsoft plans to disable computers of users who share, quote, non-mainstream content online. However, there seems to be absolutely no validity to these claims, and the quote used to create the statement was in reference to the consequences of artificial intelligence rather than users. And finally, I'd like to look at claims that New York is providing credit cards to illegal immigrants. Posts online are claiming that American Express cards are being handed out to illegal immigrants while American citizens are struggling. In reality, immigrants are being provided with prepaid debit cards as part of a pilot program set up by the city. This would allow families to buy essentials such as food and baby formula. It is worth noting that debit cards are attached to bank accounts, while credit cards are borrowed money, meaning that the economy will not be affected negatively by the program. That's all I have for now, so I'll send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce. Now, with all these facts and fact checks being thrown at us, Johnny, I think Cara has something that she'd like us to consider.
Thanks, Jordan. I want to follow up on something that I brought up in the state news, and that's the new bills proposed that would target undocumented immigrants. It's no surprise that these are controversial and have sparked rallies and protests, especially within immigrant communities. Immigration is already such a charged topic, and even more so now with the events at the Texas border. So today, I want to take a closer look at the consequences of these bills if they were to be passed. Firstly, undocumented immigrants would be unable to qualify for in-state tuition for universities, even if they're protected under DACA. Out-of-state tuition is already too steep for many citizens looking to further their education, so this bill would be absolutely debilitating. On top of that, federal aid is already hard to obtain for undocumented immigrants. Passing this would needlessly shut out so many hopeful students from post-secondary education. Another bill would also consider driving undocumented immigrants around human smuggling. This would severely limit resources and even activities undocumented immigrants can participate in, as something as simple as getting a ride to work, going to the doctor, or a sporting event could be labeled a criminal offense. These bills entail more things, such as mandating employers to check the citizenship status of employees and blocking the use of public assistance programs for undocumented immigrants, and with each new aspect, the idea is the same. Iowa is sending a clear message, and that's that it doesn't respect undocumented immigrants as taxpayers, Iowans, or community members. When drivers cross the border into Iowa, they're greeted with a sign that says, "The people of Iowa welcome you, fields of opportunities." However, the fact that these bills have even been proposed negates those statements, suggesting instead that Iowa only welcomes some people, and that the fields of opportunities are not for all. Jordan and Johnny, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Karen. We'd like to thank you for tuning in tonight to The Update, where you find all your news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, tune in next week for more updates.
For The Update, I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful Tuesday.